Hi Extension friends, Nate Birt, NTAE Key Informant here again, and today's video is going to talk about this idea of debate with direction. So one of the things I observe a lot as a consultant working on marketing, communications, fundraising, AI systems with clients is that oftentimes in conversation or in meetings, there's a tendency to talk about an issue at length and then move on to another issue without actually reaching resolution or having a specific direction in mind. Now, I want to preface this by saying that there is real value in getting divergent thinkers together in the same room and debating the merits of an issue, right? It could be climate related, it could be procedural, like it could be programmatic. How do we actually implement this climate program in a way that's effective, that makes the best possible use of the budget, that honors people's time, and gets the best impact, right? Get the results in the best public benefit outcome. At the same time, there is oftentimes, I think, a tendency to use meetings and conversations as a security blanket. And I don't want to sugarcoat it, but I also don't want to be disparaging, right? There is a tendency to use the security of having a conversation as evidence of progress when in fact nothing material has changed. And it feels good as a professional, as a person, to be contributing to a conversation, to be discussing important ideas. And as an extension professional, whether you're working in an academic setting or even in the corporate or the nonprofit world, there is a time in which you must act. You must discuss things because there is work to be done, right? And so part of the work does involve debating, discussing, figuring out direction, course correcting, and there has to be an intuition or a sort of a honing of one's ability to make executive judgments in a way that becomes increasingly effective and efficient, right? Because what none of us want is to spend hours on meetings that lead nowhere. And so what we have to do is balance the need for discussion and targeted focus with the need to then use those insights from the conversation to take action. So that's really the point of today's session. How do you better balance? How do you be more discerning in your meetings and conversations that you're leading within the climate space so that debates lead to direction and eventually action? All right, let's dive in. And the first thing I want to share is just sort of an overarching framework. And again, we could debate all kinds of things within climate. You could talk about the science and new things that science is revealing about what we know and don't know about climate, right? I come from the world of agriculture. There are all kinds of debates and lack of understanding because of simply the lack of data and study around things like soil and soil health. And what are all of the properties of soil we may not even recognize today that in 100 years we'll look back and laugh because we didn't know this, right? But again, science is always emerging and changing. The same is true for just the work of getting the climate action on the ground, right? How do we best engage our communities? How do we talk with civic leaders versus homeowners, right? All kinds of different directions we could go. So here's a framework I'm going to suggest. I would encourage you to experiment with it, see if it works for you, modify and adapt it as needed. The goal is find ways to begin in the meetings and the recurring conversations you have, whether it's planning for a program, organizing an event, or something entirely different. Find ways to start injecting this process so that you're coming to meetings better prepared as a team. You're able to have more direct, focused conversation, and you're all rowing in the same direction, so to speak, right? You know the outcome you're striving for within that meeting, right? There's often a tendency to want to have a meeting and then another meeting and then a follow-up meeting. Maybe sometimes that's necessary, but more often than not, I would argue 9 times out of 10, you can probably resolve something in one conversation if you put some sufficient guardrails on it. So the first step would be just find ways to work independently. So that means having an agenda before the meeting starts. It means assigning homework, right? Not, read these 10 documents necessarily. I actually discourage that because I don't think anyone's going to do it. Rather find, 1 or 2 key items, right? Read this report and jot down 5 to 7 bullet points with your thoughts. Is this in the right direction? What would you modify? Something I learned from Molly Immendorf at Extension Foundation is this idea of I like, I wish, I wonder, right? That's a great framework to say, I like this about this resource. I wonder about X, Y, and Z. I'm curious. And then I wish. So I guess I talked about it. I wonder. I wish would be like, I wish this had this feature, or I think this is missing. What if we added this? I wish it would include that. So that's number one. Arrive at hypotheses, trial conclusions about key core strategic questions you're discussing. Or even it could be something tactical, right? How do we execute this event to get as many people there as possible? How do we get the best speakers there? Whatever the case might be, come prepared with conclusions and hypotheses. Number two, meet and compare notes, right? So this is a chance where you're all coming together. You haven't been sharing or trading your ideas back and forth on meetings or Slack or whatever. You're coming into this warm in your mind, but cold to what the others are thinking about. And you're just discussing that. You're laying out where are the areas of commonality, where are the areas of difference. And then you're mapping out possible paths forward, right? So once you've had this discussion, you've seen similarities and differences, debate the merits of different approaches, and then land on these are three possible paths we could follow, right? This whole framework assumes that maybe not all of the decision makers are in the room, that you may have to socialize your plan or strategy further before it gets official sign-off. And so map out those paths together, write them down, right? Or record a video where you're talking through the three options. And then next, decide whose input you need next, right? Not the end-all be-all, right? A lot of times this is a complex, multi-tiered process to get approval and to move forward on a program or a proposal or whatever the case might be. So decide whose input you need next and then go get that, right? And finally, be open to revisiting or re-engineering your proposed paths forward based on new findings or new learnings or feedback that you get from other administrators or leaders who are working with you. Again, the goal of this process, debating with direction, is really to make sure that you come prepared with your best ideas. You collectively gather everyone's insights and then sort of pull it apart and repackage it into something even better and stronger, because again, it benefits from multiple perspectives, multiple areas of expertise, lived experience, etc. And then you're actually putting forward a plan. You're recommending possible directions to others who will need to give input, approval, sign off, etc. If you do this, and again, I encourage you to experiment with it this week if you can, my hope is that you'll find greater clarity entering a conversation so you don't feel sort of muddled or maybe like you're able to only get involved in the conversation halfway through, but rather you've got an agenda, you've prepared your homework, you've had the conversation and heard others' ideas, you've debated possible paths forward, and then you've identified three ways to move forward with the open-mindedness that, hey, none of these directions may be right, but based on the experts that we've assembled for our climate work, this seems like a great approach. Try it and see what you think. I'd love to hear from you. And it looks like I forgot to include my call to action. So what I'm going to say here is my call to action is basically try this, right? Try this as an experiment. Let me know what worked and maybe what surprised you. What worked and what surprised you. Send that to me at natebirt@extension.org, and I look forward to hearing about your experiences, and I hope you have a really great day, and we'll talk to you again on the next video. See ya. Bye-bye.